Hey, how's it going everyone? I'm Carlo here from All You Can Board, and today I'm doing a video going over the 10 games that I've played 100 plus times. So some of these I've played way over 100 times, some of them might have just kind of crossed the mark. I don't log my plays on Board Game Geek or anything, so a lot of these are going to be sort of estimates, but these are games that I'm 100% sure I've played at least 100 times or more. So what I'm going to be focusing on when I talk about each of these games is what makes me come back to a game this many times, right? Because a lot of these games will rank pretty highly on my top games of all time when Dylan and I do our top 50 games of all time later this year in a few weeks. And some of these games might not rank that highly on the list, might not even crack my top 50 of all time. But what is it that takes, that allows me to play a game and want to keep coming back to a game over 100 times? There's so many games these days, so many that we play once or twice or 5 times and never play again. And for a variety of reasons, each one of these probably has their own reasons as to why. And I'm going to start going through them based on kind of chronologically as to when in my life I think I got to about 100 plays on them. And I'm just going to tell you as well, do I still play these games today? So the first one on my list, I don't have any more with me here, is Magic the Gathering. So this is a card game that came out in 1993, designed by Richard Garfield. I started playing this when I was probably in grade 6 or 7, and I probably hit 100 plays sometime in still junior high, maybe early in high school. Dylan and I played this a whole lot when we were kids. The idea of, we used to get together on weekends and like have a sleepover at one of our houses, and we would just play Magic so much. We would sit there building decks and trading cards, and just like sometimes you would play with the deck and then you'd literally make 2 or 3 little changes to the deck, take out a certain creature, add in a couple more lands, whatever, play with the same deck over and over. I was never really into the competitive tournament scene a whole lot. I played some sealed deck tournaments just with friends, and that was the way I actually enjoyed playing the game most in terms of playing in the odd tournament here and there. But it's kind of what re-sparked my love of games, and it felt weird. I almost left this off the list because a lot of people don't consider this a board game. It is in the Board Game Geek database, and it's kind of like the catalyst for what, it was so formative for me as a game that kind of made me the gamer I am today. At that point in my life, I was mostly playing video games. I kind of had stopped, as a kid, I played the odd, game here and there, Payday, Life, Clue, whatever, that kind of stuff. And then I didn't really play much until a friend taught me Magic the Gathering when I was in elementary school there. And it's just the idea of how much time I've sunk into the game, even just from the building of decks over the years, it's something I haven't played in a long time now. I sold all my cards maybe 10 or 12 years ago or something like that. Don't know if it's a game I'll ever go back to again. I stopped playing it mainly because of the kind of overhead of feeling like you have to keep buying booster packs, you never know what you're going to get, and then you're trading cards, and it was kind of a lifestyle game, and it just, for where I was as a gamer at the time, I had just started getting into modern board games, like some of the ones that are going to come up on the list later, and I eventually decided to get rid of it. But this one I've probably played among the most of any game on the list, minimum for sure, 200 to 300 games. Could be upwards of 400 or 500. I have no idea. It's a fantastic game and an absolute classic, a very sort of iconic game, and something that, to this day, whenever I play a 2-player head-to-head card sort of dueling game, it's always kind of measured up against Magic the Gathering, so it'll always hold a special place for me. And just the idea of being able to try different colors, different deck combinations, there is so much variability and so much replay value in that game. I'm not at all surprised thinking back at how much I played it. But yeah, I don't think it's one I'm going to go back to anytime soon. Maybe I'll try it online someday when they have the online arena or whatever. So maybe I'll check it out on there. But as far as buying and owning cards, I think those days are behind me. So number 2 on the list here is chess. This was listed on Board Game Geek as a game from the year 1475. So everyone knows chess. I've probably played this somewhere in the range of 100 to 200 times in my life. My brother taught me how to play chess when I was, I think, 6 or 7 years old. He had a really nice glass chess set, and it was something that, again, at that time I wasn't really playing board games. I was really into video games. He introduced me to video games when I was probably 4 or 5. I was playing a lot of those. And I remember when he first taught me chess, and this kind of light bulb went off in my head where I just it was, it was something that you just sat there staring at a board trying to figure out what your pieces could do. Very, very simple rules, obviously, to pick up, but once you play, it felt like a game I knew right away, it's a game that I'd probably be playing for the rest of my life. And of all the games on this list, I'd say it's the one that is most kind of been off and on throughout my life. There's been periods where I've been playing a lot of chess and getting really into it, and then not playing it. And honestly, over the last 10, 15 years, I probably haven't played it a whole lot anymore, maybe, 20, 30 times over that period of time. But there had been different points in my life, either as a kid playing against my brother, trying to beat him, Or then again in elementary school, kind of picked it up, started playing against friends. Stopped playing for a while. Back in high school, I started playing it again. Like when we'd go to a cabin with friends, sometimes we'd have little mini chess tournaments and stuff like that. And ever since I kind of discovered more modern games, I haven't really gone back to it as much, just because I feel like I've played it a lot, and I want to, now as a gamer, I'm trying to more like explore and see what there is out there. But the interesting thing I found when I was going through my list of these 10 games is chess is the only one on this list that is 100% deterministic. And for anyone who might not know what that means, it basically is just that there's no luck, no randomness whatsoever, right? There's no variable setup. There's no, oh, you tried, like, it's basically just you have the pieces, this is what they do. If you lose, it's your own fault. If you win, it's because you were the better player, kind of thing. The game, it can be kind of scripted because of that. And I think that's also what made me stop playing after a while, was like I got to a point where I was not anywhere near like great at the game, but I was good enough that I started feeling like, okay, am I going to keep playing this and try to be like really, really good and play this competitively, or do I want to kind of see what else is out there? So I ended up kind of going the more see what else is out there kind of route. But it's got an extremely high skill ceiling, obviously, and nowadays there's a lot of abstract games, like I'll give Santorini as an example that I really, really like. And there's a game coming out, or that just came out, called That Time You Killed Me, that I'm trying to get my hands on, and I always think back on, oh, maybe I'll fall in love with that like I did with chess, kind of thing. So it's been a huge game for me throughout my life as a gamer, and one that I owe a lot to, and it's one that I know I'll continue to play off and on. I'll play it, years and years from now, and I'll always have a good time with chess. So next up on my list is this one I do have here, Carcassonne. And the reason I brought this one especially is because look how worn down this box is. So it was my gateway game into kind of modern board games. I'm 33 now, and it was probably when I was 18 or 19 that my brother introduced me to Carcassonne on the Xbox Live platform or whatever. We just started passing the controller around, playing the digital version, and I kind of was like, what? This is what board games are these days? Like, I had no idea. I didn't really know anything about modern day board games. And I instantly fell in love with this game. Just the base game, no expansions. I've played some of the expansions here and there, but this version doesn't even have the river expansion. So I absolutely fell in love with this tile laying game, 2 to 5 players. I most enjoy it with 2. I really like it with 3 as well still. Beyond that, with 4 and 5 players, it becomes more of a game of a bit of luck. What tiles do you get? Are you going to be able to actually make the best of them on your own terrain? It's less interactive because you can't, if with fewer tiles, you can't afford to be fighting people over the kind of shared terrain as much. But the idea that you kind of build the board as you go was kind of a novel concept at the time. This game came out in the year 2000, right? It just hit its 20-year anniversary. And it's a game that has so much replay value despite the simple rule set, because of the way not only that the board is going to play out, but depending who you're playing against, how early you're going to end up putting those followers out on the board, the different play styles. I have a friend who plays super aggressively and gets those workers down on the farms, basically on land, trying to like get control of that early. I have other friends who play more conservatively, holding on to their followers for late game because they want to have them available for the monasteries. Some people like to play it more friendly and keep to themselves and just maximize their own points. Other people like to get in your face and cutthroat, and that's what they really enjoy from the game. So it's an amazing game. I absolutely love this. It's one of my top games of all time. Something that I have played, the digital version alone, I probably played over 100 times on the Xbox there. And since I got this physical copy, it's a game that it was the first board game I bought. I would have this in my very first apartment when I only had one game. People would come over, and sometimes we would just play Carcassonne game after game after game. Once you have the tiles out and everything, it plays super quickly. This is a game I will never get tired of, even though I don't play it as much these days just because I've played it. My guess would be probably over 300 times. That's not even on, that might even be on the conservative end. It could be more than that. I have no idea, but this is an all-time classic for a reason. I know it gets, I don't want to say a lot of hate, but a lot of people who play it maybe once or twice or see what the kind of board game hobby has to offer these days see Carcassonne and think they dismiss it as like too basic, or, oh yeah, there's not much to see there. But I think the more you play it, you really do start to realize different sneaky ways that you can build out the terrain or kind of latch onto someone's very lucrative piece of land in a way that you didn't realize before when you played. You start to kind of have a sort of memorize like how many of each tile there are, so you can kind of hedge your bets on different kinds of things. Like, I highly encourage, if for some reason you have never played Carcassonne and people have told you, oh, don't bother with it, it's too basic, give it a chance, because there's like a beautiful simplicity to this game that I think a lot of games have never been able to match. And there's a reason why this is still around and still kicking, and people still play this all over the world today. And a side note, a big reason why this is a really special game to me too is because I actually got to play this in this version itself, not with the box. I took the pieces with me when I went traveling to Europe in 2016. I got to play Carcassonne in the city of Carcassonne, in the actual walls of Carcassonne. So maybe I'll get Dylan to put a picture up on that if I send it over to him. But anyways, that is Carcassonne. The next one on my list I don't have here with me. I no longer own the game, is Catan, formerly known as Settlers of Catan. So this game came out in 1995. And it was one of my other sort of gateway games. It wasn't quite, I learned it maybe a year or two after Carcassonne, and basically it's a much more social game. I would say it was my most social gateway game because of the kind of trading and negotiation aspects, right? This is a game I played so many times it wasn't my own choice. I had friends, like once my group of friends had all played this game, it felt like everyone went out and bought their own copy, and everyone was always hosting game nights where all they had was Catan and all they wanted to play was Catan. The last maybe 50 times I played this, it was almost reluctantly, like, I guess we're getting together, I guess you guys are going to play Catan, I guess I'll join you for the game. I kind of burned out of it after maybe, I don't even know, 100, 150 plays, but I feel like I've played it over 200 times, maybe 250. For a while, I was playing it online. There was a very good implementation where you could play it online that was fun. And even though it's a game that I don't really care, like I haven't played it in probably at least 6-7 years now, maybe longer. And it's, of all the games on this list, it's one of the ones I'm least likely to, or least kind of itching to play again. But it is a classic for a reason. I mean, again, it came out in 1995, and it does pack a lot of different elements of board games into it, right? There's the network building, there's the initial placement of your first two settlements, there's competing for the longest road and the largest army, there's the take that element of putting the knight on someone's stuff, there's the trading, there's victory points. Like, there's a lot of stuff packed into this game. There's dice rolling, whatever, but eventually I got tired of just like games where, you roll 2 dice and that's your turn. You roll 2 dice, that's your turn. Sometimes people don't want to trade with you. There's grudges that carry over from one game to the next. Sometimes people are like, this guy won the last time, we don't want him to win, or, oh, this person used Monopoly and stole all of our stuff. And it also had an element of the player who gets, like, its first to 10 points wins. So it felt like a lot of the time, once someone got to 7 or 8 points, nobody wants to trade with you anymore. So then the game kind of grinds to a halt, and then the other players trade, and then someone else gets close to 8 points. Okay, no one's trading with that player anymore. And the games, especially if you play with the same group, even though it has the variable setup, they would have a tendency to play out in a kind of similar way where certain people would refuse to trade after a certain point, or would only go for certain types of strategy off the bat or whatnot. So it is a great game, but it's just one that I've kind of moved on from. I think it's still something that if you haven't tried it, it's absolutely worth trying just to see kind of what all the hype is about. It's one of the kind of iconic games of this hobby, but it's just one I'm not personally interested in going back to anytime soon. I did get rid of my copy a few months back. Okay, next up here is Agricola, designed by Uwe Rosenberg. No spoilers because we're going to do our top 50 list of all time again real soon, but I will say this is going to be very, very, very high up on my list, basically right near the top. This is, of all the games on this list, this is the game that takes the longest to play, and even though I don't have as many plays of this as I do of some of these other games, I have it recorded in the box. I have 128 or 129 sheets where you actually have the scores on them, and then I played the solo mode maybe 3 or 4 times over the years, so I'm at 130 plus games, but the average game of Agricola is probably around 2 hours, depending on player count. When you get really familiar with it and you're playing with someone who knows the game well, at 2 players, you can maybe get a game done in just under an hour, about an hour, hour and 15 kind of range. But otherwise, it's going to be anywhere from an hour and a half to 2.5 hours kind of thing. This game is absolutely amazing, and what has brought me back to this game time after time after time, and why I played this so much, like, over 100 of these plays were probably in the span of about 3 or 4 years. Like, it was maybe the 3rd or 4th board game I ever got. Didn't even know much about board games. I owned, I think, Carcassonne, Catan, maybe Ticket to Ride as well. I don't even know. I think I might have bought this maybe even right after Carcassonne. Just saw it at the game store, looked at the back, went and read about it online, saw some good reviews, and thought, whatever, I'll take a chance on this. I had no idea that I was going to spend like hundreds and hundreds of hours playing this game over the years. But the kind of like brutal nature of this game and how unforgiving it is. You have to feed your family, every harvest, which the game plays over 14 rounds, and spaced throughout there's a certain number of harvests. I think there's 5 or 6. It's been a while since I played now. And you always have to feed them, and any family member you don't feed, you lose 3 points because they starve kind of thing. Very punishing game. You're competing for resources. this still stands as by far the best worker placement game I've played, and the card system with your occupations and minor improvements is the main reason why this game has the replay value it does, because you have this big deck of occupations and a big deck of minor improvements, and every game you have 7 of each in your hand, and that's going to be the primary kind of engine of your strategy. What are you going to do? Are you going to play an animal heavy game? Are you going to go into, baking vegetables or grain? Are you going to play a game where one of your cards lets you maybe build houses or build rooms in your house for cheaper, or there's all kinds of stuff you can do in this game. There's increasing resource spots on the board that's kind of like a push your luck element of, do you want to grab that 3 wood right now? Do you want to wait until it might turn into 6 wood next turn? Or if someone takes the starting player marker and then they go and grab that 6 wood, now you can't even get wood till the round afterwards. Every decision is so crucial in this game. Every little misstep you pay for. You can get in people's way and take what they want. This is an amazing, amazing game that I haven't played it in a long time now, and it's one that it's to introduce new players. Sometimes they find it kind of brutal to play it for the first time, and I haven't had a whole lot of success since I've played it with like the same group of people years and years and years ago when we fell in love with it. So I'm finding it tough to get to the table lately, but it's still absolutely, like, I'll never get rid of this. This is one of my favorite games of all time. I don't know what else to say. Oh, you know what I will say? I'll throw in a fun tidbit. Until Dylan and I basically started a YouTube channel, I always used to call this game Agricola. I guess I thought Agricola, I don't know. All my friends called it Agricola as well, and then I found out it's Agricola, and I had to change the way I say it just because I'm on camera talking about games all the time, so that is Agricola. All right, next up here, I never have owned this game actually. It's Dominion. So this is one that came out in the year 2008. Oh, by the way, Agricola was 2007. So Dominion is a 2008 game. I've probably played in total at least 100, 150, could be way more. Honestly, I lost track because the majority of my plays were through an online system, a website. I think it was called playdominion.com or something like that. It was years and years ago, probably almost 10 years ago. But a few friends and I, we just loved playing Dominion, but first off, the aspect of you pull open this box and you're picking different sets of cards to set up this market of 10 different types of cards. Like, the setup and teardown was quite, heavy, and even just like all the shuffling. Deck building games, that's the one drawback usually, right, is the amount of shuffling. And also, Dominion plays extremely well with 2 players, still really good with 3, but when you add a 4th player, like every other player, you're just watching someone sometimes on their turn with these combos, just do this and do this, okay, now more actions, and then draw more cards, and sometimes the other players are just sitting there like, yeah, okay, this guy's just playing his whole hand, going through their whole deck, whatever. So it is, but like, the reason why I've played it this many times is because of the fact that it had an online adaptation, and you could pay like a few bucks. Basically, my friends and I, we shared an account, and we had multiple accounts, but we had one where we basically bought a bunch of the expansions, and whoever was playing could just use that account, play with the expansions. And also online, you could set up preset, kind of like if you had a combination of, let's say you liked these 2 cards from this set, these 3 or 4 cards from this expansion, you could save different preset kind of like setups, and then you could go back to them and say, oh, that one that was called like Big Money, or the one that we called, whatever, Interactive or whatever. You could just go back and play it again and again. And there's something very addictive about this game because there's a decent amount of randomness in what order you draw your cards, or how quickly after you buy it are you going to actually draw it up, or which cards are you going to draw at the same time? Are these cards going to combo together, or are you going to keep drawing them separately, like the treasure map cards and whatnot? And most of my plays would have been with the 3 favorite expansions in this were for sure Prosperity, Intrigue, and I think it's called Seaside. I've dabbled in the other ones a little bit when I was playing online, but by the time I played this game so much online, it was always a game that I thought about buying the first time I played the physical version, and then as I got to playing it online more and more, I realized, I don't know if I want to own this, because I only want to own it if I have all the expansions or a bunch of them, and the amount of shelf space and again that kind of overhead. Like, I've played it so much, I haven't. Every once in a while, there's a few friends of mine who I'll go back to Dominion with, and we'll play. We do a Dominion Cup like once or twice a year, where we play like a best of 3 or whatever, a mini tournament. It's an amazing game. It's still the most pure deck builder out there, and there's still this addictive feel of, do you go the big money strategy and try to buy those money cards, or do you actually try and find some kind of game-breaking combo with what's in the market? It's still a super satisfying game to play, one I will never turn down a game of, but it's not one I go seeking or like being the one asking to play anymore these days, just because I've played it a lot. But yeah, that is Dominion. Next up is Keyforge. So I just have one deck here from probably my favorite set called Mass Mutation. So this came out in 2018, and if you've watched our channel before, you've probably seen Keyforge videos on here. I'm a big fan of this game. It's designed by Richard Garfield, the same designer as Magic the Gathering, which was on my earlier on my list. This is the world's first, and as of now, only unique deck card game. So you basically pay like 10 or 12 bucks for a single deck. You get 36 cards in there, and it's a randomly generated, based on an algorithm, which is currently broken, which you can go see the Future of Keyforge video if you want to see more about the broken algorithm. The game is currently in a state of sort of hiatus, but basically it came out with a first set called Call of the Archons, and they've been releasing a set every once in a while since then. And what has, like, one of the things that's made it possible, this game came out in November 2018, I think it was, and obviously the pandemic hit in March 2020. The game kind of took a step back around then, and part of the reason I've even been able to play this game as much as I have, which I would guess is probably at 200 plus plays, is there's an online website called The Crucible, and it's kind of run by volunteers. It's an unofficial platform, and you can play games on there, and again, similar to Dominion, it saves you on the shuffling and getting your deck out, and you know what I mean? Like, the overhead is, everything is simplified, and it makes everything easier and quicker. I've played it so much on there. I've played it minimum 50, 60 times in person, physical copy as well. I hosted a couple sealed deck tournaments at my place, and what brings me back to this game is the element of discovery. Buying a new deck, and then, you think initially, oh, this doesn't have very good cards, or certain cards. One of the things I love is in this game, there's some cards that are inherently always good, but then there's a lot of cards that are situational. In some decks, they're bad. In some decks, they're really good. In some decks, they're somewhere in between. They're situational, and you have to figure out how to make them work, or how to make that particular deck work. And I love the challenge of taking a deck that seems bad, or that I lose a bunch with at first, and trying to figure out how to win with it. And every game is a different puzzle to figure out. You're playing against other unique decks, playing with different decks all the time. It just gives you a new decisions to consider all the time. It's an amazing game, one that I hope sticks around for a long time, has the potential for a very bright future, and if it sticks around, I will be playing this for a long time. I just played it online again the other day with a friend, so of all the games on this list, it's one of the ones I've been playing more recently, I would say. Amazing game, highly recommend you check out Keyforge. Next up is a game I don't actually have the physical copy of. It is called Twice as Clever. So this is a roll and write game, and I'll say it right now, the physical copy I've maybe only played 5-10 times, something like that. But it's the app version on my phone. I got the app at the start of the pandemic. I think it was like April of 2020 or something like that. And on the app, I think I logged, what was it? I had it typed in here, 137 plays on the app. So my guess would be I'm somewhere around 140 plus in total. And between April and November of 2020, I played this game 137 times on the app. What brought me back to this game over and over, and what had me, first off, I'll just say I do like it a little more than That's Pretty Clever, which is the first one in the series. I haven't played Clever Cubed, which is the third one that came out this year just yet. I am hoping to play it, but it's the satisfaction of the combos, how quickly the game plays on the app. You can play a game in like 5 minutes, sometimes quicker. You might be able to play 3 minutes, 5 minutes. A long game might take you like 10, 12 minutes if you're really puzzling over maximizing your actions. You really want to beat your high score, but that's what brings me back, or what brought me back for so long, was the trying to beat my high score. In case you're curious, for fans of Twice as Clever out there, my current high score that I have registered in the app is 389. But when I looked back at the high scores before that, I went 340, 351, I think it was, 382, a big jump, and then up to 389. And then once I hit 389, you can see that's the line on the app. You can see like, when did you last play? That was my last play. I think once I hit 389 and realized I beat that 382, and I thought, when am I going to beat that high score again? So I haven't gone back to it since then. It's a game I'd be happy to play again. I think it works amazingly well in the app as a solo game. In person, with two is still good. When you add a third and a fourth player, for what it is, it feels like it takes a bit long. I'm not a huge fan of playing in person with more than two players. But yeah, that very addictive aspect of like trying to find those combos and just squeeze everything you can and make the best out of your dice rolls is something that helped me get through like a pretty good stage of that pandemic. And I'm grateful to have had it on my app. Totally got my money's worth on that one. I'll probably play it again throughout my life, absolutely. Just, it's not one I'm going to be requesting to play myself. All right, the 9th game on this list is Lost Cities. This is a Reiner Knizia classic 2-player only card game. This came out in 1999. I've played, in terms of the full 3-round version of the game, I've played this somewhere between 110 or 120 times probably. I have a few more on BGA in the ranked mode, which I'm going to get to the ranked mode and why I have a problem with it. But what brings me back to this game and what made me love it so much, first off, is the quick back and forth turns, okay? Reiner Knizia does something in a lot of his card games like Lost Cities and Battle Line, which Battle Line I like even more. It's just there's no online implementation. That's why I haven't played it as much. But I do think Battle Line is the better game. But what he does that I really like is you start your turn by playing a card, and then you're going to draw up at the end of your turn. So a lot of other board games, card games, whatever, let you draw cards at the start of your turn, so it's harder to plan your turn when it's someone else's turn, because if you start your turn by drawing a card, you're basically starting by gaining new information and having to reassess your possibilities, your options right off the bat. And I love that on Lost Cities, you start by playing a card and then you draw at the end of your turn, so you can already start planning your next one. And what this creates, especially online, is you can just, sometimes the turns are like bouncing back and forth. Like sometimes your turn is 1 second or 2 seconds, or like I can't like understate or overstate here how quickly this game can go back and forth. Sometimes a few turns are scripted because you know what you're going to play in order. You're trying to play cards in these 5 different rows. You're kind of making wagers at how many cards of a certain color and type you can get in ascending order to score points. It's got a really interesting dynamic of how quickly it plays, but what really sets this game apart for me and what takes it to the next level, and which is what I don't like about the ranked version on Board Game Arena, is that this game plays over 3 rounds, and after each round, you're going to score what happened, and then you're going to shuffle up the deck, and you basically play the same game 3 times. But you're carrying over your score from round to round, and then you just sort of tally up the 3 rounds at the end. On Board Game Arena, the ranked version, you only do 1 round. And the beauty of this game is in the 3-round structure, because if you were just playing 1 round, you could approach every time you play, every round, with the same kind of strategy. You could play it safe, aim for a kind of target number of points, whatever. When you play this in 3 rounds, you have to adjust in that second and third round based on your standing in the game, based on how many points ahead or behind you are, how close the game is. And what this creates is not only a shifting kind of approach every round, but it also creates the opportunity for these amazing, spectacular comebacks. Sometimes you will wipe the floor with someone. Sometimes you'll have games where you beat someone by like 150 points, and it can't feel good for that person. And sometimes you almost feel bad or whatever. But the idea of being like, I've had games where I was behind, 50, 80 points going into that final round. I have had a couple games where I was behind 100 plus points, and that made me play it extremely risky, where I had to hold on and really prioritize getting those 3 wager cards in the same row, maybe on 2 separate rows. But if you can make that like amazing comeback, it's so satisfying. Meanwhile, if you instead went into the final round and you were ahead by like 30, 40 points, maybe you play it more conservatively, because all you have to do is just preserve your lead. So you're not going to play as many of those wager cards, which means there might be more of those wager cards out on the board for your opponent. So it really changes the dynamic having that 3-round structure. And if this wasn't on Board Game Arena, I wouldn't have played it as much as I did, because the idea of, again, a lot of shuffling, and then the scoring takes a bit of time because of the way it kind of adds and multiplies and stuff. So the physical version I've only played a few times. It's still a wonderful game in person, but I played all my plays of this on Board Game Arena were during the pandemic. I just got hooked on this game on Board Game Arena and played a ton of it. It's one I will continue to play, and I'm happy I have a copy of the physical version in my collection. If you haven't tried it, I highly recommend it, but again, I even more highly recommend Battle Line. Okay, and last but certainly not least, this is the game that I reached or cracked the 100 play mark most recently. One of the greatest games of all time. That is Race for the Galaxy. This is designed by Tom Lehman, who also designed Res Arcana, which is another amazing tableau building game. This plays 2 to 4 players, and honestly, of all the games that I've mentioned here, this might be the one that has most like risen in terms of how much I like it. Okay, this came out in 2007. Was also one of the very first games I bought, probably in 2009 or 2010 sort of thing. And this is one that I liked a fair amount when I first got it, but like I wasn't very good at the game, and there was something about the strategy that I found tough to kind of wrap my head around. And it was a tough game to introduce new people to because of the iconography. It's not a super easy game to teach, considering how quickly it plays once you know what you're doing. But it's an amazing tableau building game where you're racing. Once any player has played their 12th card, it triggers the end of the game. But it's simultaneous play. There's no downtime, which is one of the things that has kept me coming back to this over and over, is that it has this action selection system where before the round starts, every player is secretly choosing a card that shows which action or phase or phases, in the case of the two-player game, that they're going to trigger, and then you all reveal, and let's say you and your other opponents all reveal different phases. Well, you're each going to play through those phases, but the person who selected that card is going to get a bonus sort of once that phase triggers. So you're trying to anticipate what your opponents are going to pick so that you can piggyback off their actions, but sometimes you want to pick that because you can't afford to not get through that phase if no one else picked it, or you want the bonus from that phase. The game is basically just 100 cards. It's somewhere around, I don't know if it says on here, 109 cards. So it's basically 109 cards, and then there's some pretty basic little victory point tokens, but that's it. It's basically just a card game. I've played, so I have here, I didn't mark it down actually, but I played probably about, I think it was 85 times or so on the phone app, and another, I think 40 or 45 on Board Game Arena, and then in person maybe 30 or 40 times. So this is probably in the 150 to 180 plays kind of range, but it cracked the 100 plus mark over the last few months because not only have I started playing the ranked version here and there on Board Game Arena lately, because it literally takes like 5 to 7 minutes on average to play a game, which is amazing. There's no game I can think of that packs that amount of decisions and that amount of sort of satisfaction in a 5 to 7 minute playtime online. It's incredible. But also, as a new dad, I have a baby who's just over 3 months old. Having the phone app, there's been times where I'm, rocking my baby to sleep in one arm and playing the app in my other hand kind of thing. I actually developed a weird case of tennis elbow somewhat recently. I think it was probably because of playing Race for the Galaxy one-handed on the app. But it's such an amazing game. It feels like there's always different route to victory. Like you start with a starting world, but unlike, there's a lot of games where you start with like a starting card or a starting, your variable player power, and something kind of determines how you're going to have to play that game to have a chance at winning. And in this, I think that's what held me back for a while, is thinking that, you have to play specifically to that. But there's so many decisions to make. Are you going to stubbornly pursue what your starting world tells you to do? Are you going to adapt based on what you have in your hand? And the amazing thing about this, something that Dylan and I have spoken about before that we love in these kinds of games, is that the aspect of the cost to play a card is discarding cards from your hand. So if I have 7 cards in my hand and this card costs 5 on it, I have to discard 5 other cards. So you're deciding always which cards do I want to play. The ones that cost more make me discard more of my hand, so I'm losing out on options. It's not easy to draw more cards in this game. And just playing more lately, I feel like it's a game that I've realized more over the past couple of years, and I've come to appreciate more and more just how much depth and replayability this has. It's probably my favorite card game of all time. In terms of games that are basically entirely cards. Definitely my favorite tableau builder. It's just an amazing game. I'm going to keep coming back and playing this for years and years. I can see myself playing this hundreds of more times. And honestly, I'll say right now, I've only played the base version. There's multiple expansions out, and I feel like there's still so much to explore with just the base game. If you haven't played it, I highly recommend you check it out on Board Game Arena for free. Again, it's a bit of a difficult game to learn or to teach someone else at first, but once you get used to it, and if you kind of like it after the first play or two, but you're not really sure, I recommend you give it a few more plays. If you just straight up don't like it, then don't force yourself to go play it. But there's a reason why this has been played so much for me, and especially lately, this one has just probably cracked that 100 plus play mark in the last few months. And like I said, you can find me on Board Game Arena playing this basically all the time, whenever I have free time. So that's it. Those are the 10 games I've played 100 plus times. There are a couple other games that came close to making the list. For Sale, which is an excellent filler game. I think I have about 80 some plays logged on Board Game Arena. Gloomhaven I came maybe somewhat close to. I feel like there's Can't Stop, which is another push your luck game on Board Game Arena. There's others that will inevitably eventually crack the 100 plus plays, but those are the ones that cracked it so far. I'm very curious to hear, do you have any games that you've played more than 100 times? If so, let me know which ones in the comments below. Let me know about how many times you've played. And honestly, even if you haven't played them 100 times, what is your most played game, or your 2 or 3 most played games? I'm always curious to hear what are the games that offer the most replayability to people, and which games have kind of helped make them the gamers they are today. So let me know in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider giving it a like. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet for plenty more videos like this. Again, keep an eye out. We'll be doing our top 50 games of all time in a couple weeks right over the holiday season. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.